They gave him to me the way you give someone a ceremonial sword, because it looks right in the room, not because you expect it to be used. His name was Rook Caden, 39 years old, former Frontier Systems engineer from a human relay station nobody at the Solent court had ever bothered to locate on a map. The advisory council arranged the assignment in 40 minutes. Matching him to me took less time than selecting the floral arrangements for the convocation hall. Lord Vesson explained it over lunch. The compact needed a human presence at court, a visible one, and an engineer-grade consort carried no political weight. He would make no alliances. He could offend no one. He was, Vesson said, smiling at his wine, entirely decorative. I did not argue. I was 26 days into a regency I had not asked for, drowning in a court that had served my mother for 30 years and felt no particular obligation to serve me, and I did not have the room to fight about a consort. Rook Caden arrived on a Tuesday. He shook my hand, held eye contact for exactly as long as was appropriate, and said he was glad to be there. Not honored, not overwhelmed. Glel, as if he had accepted a reasonable posting and intended to do reasonable work. I remember thinking, good, simple, no complications. Within a week, I had stopped hearing him. It happens at court. Not cruelty, just the way attention distributes itself. There are advisors who have held their positions for decades and know how to occupy the center of a room, and there are people who stand at the edges and speak carefully. And after a while, the edge voices become a kind of ambient sound. Rook said it on my morning briefings. He asked questions, good questions I would understand later, the kind that expose assumptions, and my senior staff answered them with the particular patience people reserve for those they do not expect to need. He filed a structural report in the 3rd month. I know the date now. The 14th day of the Solent autumn session, delivered in writing to my desk, flagged as non-urgent by my administrative secretary, slid beneath 3 trade petitions and a border access renewal. The report concerned the main throne room's vaulted arch, the great one, the famous one, the arch that appears in every official rendering of the Solent court going back for centuries. Rook had noticed hairline fractures in the load-bearing keystone. He had done the calculations. He had identified the one interior corner of the room, the northeast alcove behind the standing banners, cramped and unglamorous, that would remain structurally sound if the arch failed. He had also identified the main doors as the worst possible exit in that event, because the arch's collapsed geometry would direct the primary debris field directly toward them. His report recommended immediate inspection and a temporary rerouting of formal court access. My secretary flagged it non-urgent because the arch was 400 years old and had never failed before. I did not read it. I signed the acknowledgement receipt, which my secretary handled, and moved on to the border petition. The state convocation fell on the 61st day of autumn. 43 dignitaries, my full advisory council, 2 trade delegations, and the assembled court. The throne room was at capacity, bright with formal lighting, the arch overhead doing what it had done for 4 centuries, holding, until it didn't. The sound was not what I expected, not a crack or a boom. A low, sustained groan, the kind that seems to come from inside the walls rather than from any specific point, and then a scatter of dust from the keystone, fine as powder, drifting down onto the heads of the assembled court. One of the trade delegates looked up, then Vesson looked up, then everyone looked up, and then everyone moved toward the main doors. It was immediate and total, the way panic concentrates a crowd. 43 bodies pressing toward the exit, the advisory council leading, robes and formal attire compressed into a single urgent mass. I was 3 steps into that movement myself when a hand closed around my wrist. Not hard, not pulling, just present, stopping me the way a steady surface stops a fall. Not that way, Rook said. His voice was level, the same voice he used in morning briefings, the same even register, as if he were redirecting me around a scheduling conflict. The arch collapse pushes toward the main entrance, he said. Northeast alcove, behind the standing banners. Now, I looked at his face. It was calm in a way that was not the absence of fear. I could see the fear, control behind his eyes, but the calm of someone who had already done the calculation and arrived in a number he trusted. I went with him. He moved along the room's eastern wall with 3 members of my personal guard who had been close enough to hear him, and he did not run. He walked at exactly the pace that kept us smooth and deliberate and did not trigger the crowd's motion. We reached the northeast alcove and pressed into it, behind the standing banners, and Rook put his back against the interior column and braced. The arch came down 11 seconds later. The sound was enormous. The debris field, as he had calculated, drove toward the main doors, toward where the mass of the court had been moving, had perhaps already cleared. I could not know. Dust and stone and 4 centuries of the Solène Court's famous architecture moved in the direction he had said it would move, and the column at our backs held, and the alcove held, and we were covered in dust and the ringing silence that follows very loud things. But we were alive. Rook had a gash across his left forearm from a fragment he had taken without stepping back from the column. He had kept his position, kept his arm up, kept the stone from reaching my face. He held his arm against his side, not making much of it, and looked at the 3 guards and then at me. "Is everyone standing?" he said. It was not quite a question. We were standing. The weeks that followed were administrative and exhausting. The court relocated. The injured were treated, and there were injured. The main exit had been partially blocked by the collapse, and the crowd had slowed. Slower than they might have been. More people standing than might have been, if the debris field had caught a denser mass at the door. I read his report on the 4th night. I found it myself, in the physical files in the stack beneath the border petition where it had sat for 47 days. I read it by the light of a desk lamp in a temporary office in the Eastern Annex, and I read it twice, and I sat with it for a long time. He had written it carefully. No alarm. No demand for immediate action. A methodical account of what he had observed, the measurements he had taken, the structural logic of how the fractures would propagate under load. He had included a diagram of the room. He had marked the alcove in the northeast corner with a small notation. Load-bearing integrity expected to hold in primary failure scenario. He had walked into the throne room on some ordinary morning, within his first weeks at court, and looked at the arch the way he looked at everything. As a system, as a thing that could fail, as a question worth answering. And he had answered it, and written it down, and sent it to my desk. He had been standing in that room, seeing what no one else was looking at, since before anyone at court had bothered to learn his name. I visited him in the medical wing the following morning. His arm had been properly closed by then, and he was sitting up, reviewing something on a handheld, something structural from the look of the diagrams. He put it down when I came in. I did not have a prepared speech. I sat in the chair beside him and placed the report on the table between us, the original, still dusty from the archive stack. "I should have read this," I said. He looked at the report and then at me. "You had a full desk." "I did," I said. "That isn't the same thing as an excuse." He was quiet for a moment. Outside, I could hear the ordinary noise of the annex. Footsteps, a cart, someone giving instructions about cabling. "The arch had good bones," he said finally. "Another season, maybe 2. It wasn't urgent in the way urgent usually presents. I understand why it was filed where it was filed." He was being generous. He had spent 3 months watching his words settle to the bottom of rooms, and he was sitting in a medical wing with stitches in his forearm, and he was being generous. "I would like to correct that," I said, "if you're willing. Starting with this." I tapped the report. He looked at it. "I'd want an actual chair in the briefings," he said. "Not the one by the door." "Done," I said. He nodded once. Not a forgiveness, exactly. Not an absolution. Something quieter. An agreement to begin from where we actually were, which was the only place either of us had. I had called him Ornament. I had stopped hearing him within the week. I had put his report beneath a border petition and left it there while the arch above my court counted down its last 47 days. He had stayed anyway. Read the room anyway. Written down anyway. I'm still not sure what to call that, except the thing I almost did not deserve.